Super excited to welcome in a guy who is well known in the world of creativity and in the world of creating new things and new aspects for business, for lives. His name is Jonathan Fanning. He's written several books. He wrote Who Are You Becoming? He wrote I Once Was Lost. He's been coaching leaders, Fortune 500 executives, small business owners. He's really quite a remarkable guy from what I understand. And his latest book, we wanted to kind of get into and talk about. It's called Creativity Unleashed. And this is about innovation and world-class innovators. He'll have a chance to talk to us here. And by the way, I'm looking forward to speaking with him also because I believe he was voted the best speaker at a recent TEDx conference. So he's really got to be good here. There's a lot of pressure on him. Jonathan Fanning, everybody.
Ah, Mark, so good to be with you. So good to be with you. And
It's
yeah,
exciting.
Creativity Unleashed.
Yeah, Creativity Unleashed, indeed. So the idea is that we all have it in us, right? And it's just a question of how we express it or how we marshal it for each one of us.
Sure, absolutely. And not just have it in us, but we have more creativity in more areas than we even come close to using. And a lot of people, when you say creativity, they assume art and they assume art, music, writing, but it's finances, it's impact on the world, it's how you communicate, it's how you parent, it's what you do with your vacations, it's actually how much you're able to take vacation, all of that stuff.
So that really is sort of a global, meaning a complete view of an individual. And
Yep.
give me an example maybe of the kind of thing you're talking about that we might ignore or that we might not realize we're capable of.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, this is one of the reasons I wrote the book. Years ago, a good friend of mine played professional baseball in Europe, right? And when he told a group of his friends when he was in high school, he said, "I'm going to play baseball for a living. And we're like, "You're not good enough." And he's like, "No, I am. Maybe not here, but I am." And we all said, "No, no." And he ends up going and playing professional baseball in Germany and then in Tuscany in Italy. And then, halfway through that, he says to me, he says, "Fanning, you like baseball. Why don't you help me coach baseball in Tuscany?" And my immediate thought was what most of us would think. Sounds great, but impossible, right? I'm in the middle of life. I'm in the middle of a career. I'm in the middle of, right? And so many of us, we don't even give the chance to an idea. It's this little seed of an idea. Could I do that? And we pluck the seed on our own. We don't need someone else to do it. And that's just one little example of
Uh,
creativity in life.
I love that story for the fact that in it there is the anxiety that we all have about sort of the logistics of life.
Yeah.
How would that work? I
Yeah.
haven't done that. I have obligations here, etc. How much of life, and we're all experiencing, I'm going through this right now with a number of plans and a number of things happening, events you have no control of, and you begin to sort of be a hostage to logistics,
Mm,
leaving apart, some of the more serious things that you might have to deal with where you have no choice.
sure.
I'm wondering how you navigate the logistics and the anxiety around sort of life expectations and logistics.
Oh yeah, no, that's a beautiful question. We love creativity in the rearview mirror. After it's worked. Hey, it worked out, great. Steve Jobs, brilliant, brilliant. And we forget that for 12 years, Apple said, "Take a vacation, please. We don't want you here. Thanks, but no thanks." I was in a museum. My wife takes me to see this art gallery, and we spent 2 hours in an art gallery, and I'm thinking like the guy never sold a piece of art. I'm in a classic starving artist's art gallery, but he sold some art after he died, right? This guy, he painted something every day for 10 years, 2,000 paintings, sold one in his lifetime. If that's your brother-in-law, Mark, right? Thanksgiving, Memorial Day, 4th of July party, picnic, barbecue. Are you still doing the art thing? You know, And but 100 years after he dies, one of Van Gogh's paintings sells for $82 million, right? And the question is, was he successful? Was he creative? And I guess going back, we love creativity in the rearview mirror. The logistics part is the hard part. We studied some of the most creative people and leaders and organizations in history, and we found out that what they do differently is not complicated, nor is it comfortable. And I think most of us would rather it be complicated and comfortable. you
Sure.
know but it's neither. And if it was complicated, at least we could say, well, there's a lot to that. But one of the pieces of creativity we saw is they're willing to do things that won't work, and they almost know they won't work. They know that version one is going to be bad. The first time they do it, it's not going to be successful. It's not going to make money. It's not going to. You look at Van Gogh's paintings for about 7 years, almost all of them, you think, like, who's buying that? He painted a lot of ugly sunflowers and ugly starry nights before he got to the versions we know.
Is
Mark,
that is that then the fear of failure could oftentimes keep us away from legitimate creativity?
yeah, it's the fear of failure, but there's another little piece to it that we found, and it's that the most creative people, they tend to embrace the idea that they will fail. So they set up, and this is very, very powerful. They set up simple experiments designed to fail. But where they say, I'm going to learn something from this, and I'm not going to sink the ship if it doesn't work. I call it in the book, we call it F40B, failing, 4 Fs, failing forward, fast, and frequently, right? But if you can, in parentheses, do it off Broadway.
Sure.
Do it in a way that you don't go broke because it didn't work. Mark, I ran an entrepreneur camp for teenagers years ago. And I did it because I've started several businesses. And I kept thinking, like, why do I meet people in the corporate world all the time that are CEOs, even of sometimes of Fortune 500 companies? And they'll say, Jonathan, like, you start a business. Like, I don't know if I could ever do that. And I thought, like, what is it? And it's what you said. So I said, well, I'm gonna do an entrepreneur camp for teenagers. And I thought about it, and then I said, stop thinking about it and run version one. So I said, well, how do you run version one? I don't know how to run it. I found somebody that was great at this kind of stuff. And I said, all right, let's get some kids to show up and let's run version one. And we did. And we had, I think, 7 kids at version one, and it was unbelievable. The lessons, was it a success? We made about $1 an hour,
Right,
total.
right, right. You're not measuring success based on the money you're making, right? But
Yeah,
you're saying
yeah,
you made such an impact, and I'm
yeah.
betting, not to skip ahead, please finish the story. But I was as you were talking about them, I thought, wow, kids aren't encumbered with all
Mhm.
the crap that we are. Like
No, they're
they
not.
don't. When you put them in that order, they go, "I got an idea. I got an idea." Am I
Yeah.
right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Mark. So one of the exercises we've done this with about 1,000 kids since then. So version one
Wow,
was, I think, 7, you know,
wow.
but we've also done it with adults, with 30 and 40-year-old. Sometimes we'll go to a prestigious MBA program and we'll find out that the adults have a longer list of why something can't happen. They've lived long enough to know that here are the ways to fail. And the kids don't have that. One of the exercises we do usually is, you're going to make $120 profit in the next hour. And you tell a 13-year-old kid that, and they look at you and go, okay, all right. They don't totally see how it happens, but they're willing to do things. And so often the adults are like, this is not going to happen. And you help. We just did this actually with a group of kids. You help one kid make some amount of money in some finite amount of time doing something they've never done before. And they never see the world the same again.
So it's interesting. Jonathan Fanning, Creativity Unleashed is the book. I want to ask you about something that you just mentioned. I would call it beta testing. You called it sort
Mhm.
of, you had the F's there, all your F's.
Yeah.
But where but it's really key because you're suggesting that you do need to sort of trial balloon stuff. You need to try to
Mm.
hatch it, but you have to hatch it in a less high profile way or with less on the line. And
Mhm.
that way you can do your refining before prime time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And we find this is true not just in starting a business, but in creativity and communication. Abraham Lincoln loved communicating, and he would read a story, read a biography, and then on his way home from the library as a teenager, he would stop and tell that story to dozens of people, and he would get better at the story. So he was iterating. He was beta truck. He was prototyping, communicating a story. And I work with leaders all over the world, and I'm constantly telling them, prototype your email messages. Prototype, take your meeting agenda that's usually an hour and make it half as long. And try it. Don't try it forever. Don't say from now on, from henceforth, every Tuesday managers meeting is two. No, but prototype it and then go, okay, that was okay, but it needs version 2 will probably be better. Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
terrific. That's really great advice. So, for those who are not in business, and for those of us who we've done okay in our businesses and in our lives, but we still have some kick and some chapters left. I mean, we want to innovate maybe in some of the ways that you've described. Maybe it's communication, maybe it is business, maybe it's starting a new business.
Yeah.
What is a general kind of road sign you can offer us to, put us in the right direction?
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful question. So one of the most powerful and simple things we found in this research was that the quality of our lives, the quality of our influence hinges on the quality of the questions that we pursue. And we found that most people, they don't even know what questions they're pursuing. So we found that if we pick a slightly better question, all of a sudden it completely raises the lid, opens the doors to a massive amount of creativity. For example, I do some work teaching teenagers leadership, right? And I was doing that, and about a year ago, I sat there thinking, how do I make this more memorable and more meaningful? Right. And that simple question in your life, you could say, how can I make this weekend more memorable and more meaningful? And all of a sudden, it's just completely your brain loves finding solutions. But if you give it these mediocre problems to solve, or mediocre questions, or boring or uninspired, or yesterday, it goes. Right. So I'm doing this program, and I started asking that, how do I make this more meaningful and memorable? And it was a program with teenagers and their parents were involved, or an adult in their life. So I said, you know what I'll do? I'll try this, a version 1. I'll have them every week I'm with them. Every time I'm with them, I was with them once a week for an hour. I said, I'll have one of the kids with an adult in their life teach a little 5-minute lesson. And I'll see how it goes. And I said, I'm setting myself up for there's going to be a kid who the adult doesn't show up. There's going to be problems. And version 1, version 2, version 3. Eventually, I started giving them themes. And this one session, I gave this kid the theme of generosity in your life. And he shows up, and his dad, and the kid's 13, and they're talking about some things they do. And it happened to be right after Thanksgiving. I think it was December 10th. And the dad says, he says, can I tell him about the sandwiches? And the kid kind of looks a little embarrassed and goes, yeah, yeah, all right. And I'm thinking, okay, sandwiches, great. And the dad says, Thanksgiving every year we have this amazing meal, a lot of family, and then we watch games and we eat and and then he says that usually 7, 8 o'clock at night, one of us goes to the table and we get out all the leftovers and we start making, sandwiches. And I'm thinking, okay, that's great. Okay. And he says, we end up making about 200 or 300 sandwiches. And I looked at this dad thinking, like, who has that many leftovers from Thanksgiving? He said, it's not all leftovers. We make a couple extra turkeys. And I thought, oh, okay. And he said, and then we load up coolers in the trunk of the car. And on Thanksgiving night, usually about 10 o'clock at night, we go down in New York City. And we go to a part of the city where no one had the meal we just had. And we open the trunk and we hand out 200 or 300 sandwiches. And he said it's become this little Thanksgiving tradition. And I sat there thinking, like, oh, how do you make this more memorable and more meaningful? And I gave them the framework. I gave them a question. I gave myself a question, right? But the kids in that class, I didn't teach them anything that day. This other parent and kid did, and they leave there going like, I don't know if I'm going to do that, but I could do something that's more generous somewhere in my life.
That's, I mean, that's profound, is what that
Mm,
is. I mean, but I'll tell you what I love about that. I love with your memorable and meaningful thing.
mhm.
I like that it's scalable. I like that you
Yeah.
can make it, as you say, whatever you want it to be. You could make the weekend
Yeah.
memorable and meaningful,
Mhm.
or you could make the life memorable and meaningful, or everything in between. And that's what
Absolutely.
I really like about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Creativity Unleashed is the book. Um, it's 5 Habits of World-Class Innovators. So in the book, you discuss innovations that we know about and innovations that have been developed from, uh, well, I mean, world-class innovators. They must be,
Mhm.
these are pretty high-profile innovations.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And in all walks of life too. We looked at parents, we looked at people who start businesses, we looked at people who get involved in social causes, and we found over and over again there were a few overlaps. They don't approach the world the same way, but they tend to pursue better questions. They tend to be unbelievably curious and ask questions about things. And a lot of us, we stop asking questions at some point, maybe in our teenage years. We stop asking all that. We just think like this is the way the world works, and this is what's going to happen. We love to in the book and when we work with companies, we love to give people simple ways to do it. Like how can I 2x this? Or how can I get the same result in half the time? My entrepreneur camp, when we started running it, I was doing other things. I was so busy. I was consulting for mostly Fortune 100 companies. And I said, I'd love to do this more, but I don't have the time. So I started asking this question: who could market it for me so I don't have to do any marketing? Right. And it's just a different question. It's like, how can I get a result with a different effort? How can I
Sure.
how can I make an impact? How can I
Yeah. How can I reconfigure what's going on?
yeah,
How
yeah.
leaders and parents stimulate or stifle creativity. A self-weeding garden, the ultimate hiring hack,
Hmm.
is what's being posted here. Einstein's Hour, applying
Yeah.
innovation in everyday life. This is all stuff from your book, I take it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And let me ask you a question about on the way out here. Who's a better innovator, men or women, boys or
Oh.
girls?
I don't have a good answer to that one.
Well, I
You know,
do. I would guess girls. All my
yeah,
money's on girls.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I love that you asked that though, because the easiest people say, Jonathan, like, what's the one thing I can do? And I always tell them, get a problem that bothers you enough that you're
Uh,
not willing to leave it alone. And I would say, my wife with all kinds of stuff, she's always thinking like, okay, we got to figure that out. That bothers me enough, we got to figure that out. So it's really, will you let something bother you enough where you say, I'm not going to hope somebody else does something about it, I'm going to dive in. We
I,
have a
I,
chapter.
uh,
Good.
yeah, no, I know. I was going to interrupt. I'm sure it's not a gender specific thing, but I love that because I always feel as though we're distracted as men by so many things, uh, trying to get over with some woman we've met, or, we're
Mhm,
always on the
mhm.
make, you know what I mean?
Yes.
We're so easily distracted from that by that kind of thing. Machismo always distracts. I want
Oh
to
yeah.
be the best,
Yeah.
the biggest, the richest, but whatever, the
Yeah.
strongest. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
I just feel like guys are succumb to that. I mean, listen, it's not like the fairer sex is perfect at all either. But I just was curious whether you'd noticed anything, any trends in all your research and all your work. But I'm sure
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
varies, and that's interesting. When you identify a problem in a situation, you're saying that's when you generally find the creativity.
Yeah, yeah. Einstein was asked if he had to solve a complicated problem, and he only had an hour to do it, right? And the questioner said, "And your life depends on it." He said, "What do you do?" And Einstein says, "I spend the first 55 minutes thinking about what's the actual problem, and then the last 5 minutes solving that." And most of us just go right into solving it, And the how do we get the garden to weed itself? When I work with companies, I constantly ask them like, how do you get the when you're interviewing people, how do you get the garden to weed itself? How do you get the people that they'd be horrible in your culture, right? How do you get them to opt out on their own of the interview process, right? And that's a different problem than how do we notice it? If we say, how do we get them to notice it and say, I don't fit here? It's a completely different problem. It's a completely different problem. It's like asking the question of how do I get to spend like twice as much time with people I love spending time with? Very different question, and it helps us head down a completely different path.
I can see why you're a coach and why you're so good. I can see how you could take a group of people, athletes, prospective innovators, whatever,
Mhm.
adolescents or even kids younger, and speak. You've got a great way about kind of breaking things down. I'm looking forward to getting to the book. The book is Creativity Unleashed. Jonathan Fanning's latest is, again, 5 Habits of World-Class Innovators. All there, Creativity Unleashed, 5 Habits of World-Class Innovators. We'll have a link to the book, and you'll get the Mark Thompson Show bump off of that link under this video and off of the main show. Oh, wow. So nice to meet you, my friend, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.